They were okay now. They were okay, Light Touch thought to himself as he took dainty but quick steps through the grass, constantly surveying his surroundings. They were imprisoned, but now they were free, and everything was going to be okay.
That's right, clever pony. You got us out. You know what to do now.
Yes, of course, he muttered, licking his dry lips.
Quiet! I thought you were stealthy.
Yes, sorry. Light focused entirely on being silent as he made his way into Ponyville. The sun had set hours ago, and he was cloaked in darkness as he headed for the center. But he still kept his eyes pricked, and dove to hide every so often, making sure he was alone before continuing on. The confident voice in his head urged him along, and he picked up his pace when he saw his destination. The few lights of the town gleamed off the crystal castle ahead of him. It stood tall and beautiful, a shining testament to the grace of the Princess of Friendship, and he couldn't help but smile in awe.
Princess of Friendship? What a ridiculous title,
the voice growled.
What weak, helpless creatures you all are, that you admire friendliness and mercy. Now I dream of a world where only the strongest, most deserving survive.
Yes, and what a great world that will be, Light answered eagerly. He didn't need to hold himself back anymore. He was capable of amazing things, and all it took was a unique friend to convince him of it.
Shut up and focus. Can you reach that open window?
Right, he still had work to do. Light examined the window. That window? You got it, pal. He reached into one of his saddlebags, pulling out a length of rope with hooks at one end and a pulley system below it. I'd levitate up, but my magic would be too conspicuous at this time of night.
I know! Just get us up there!
Light waited for a moment, though, ears tilted toward the window and listening. There was no sound coming from inside, and whatever room it led into was dark. Light gave the rope a few test tosses, then finally swirled it and threw the hooked end up towards the windowsill. It landed with a clink, and he tugged it so the hook caught in the corner of the sill and wall. He waited again, watching for someone to come check out the noise, but there was only silence. With the rope secure, he tied the end around his waist and grabbed the section of rope that looped through the pulley, giving it a tug. He was lifted up, and bit by bit he was able to pull himself all the way up to the window. He slowly peeked inside, and once he was sure it was secure, he climbed in and put away his apparatus.
Very good. Now, get moving before someone comes in.
Light crossed to the door and looked out into the hall. He didn't see or hear anyone, so he stepped out. He's never been in this castle, but with some research, he had been able to find a map of the layout that had been sent to Canterlot by Twilight Sparkle shortly after the castle had been created. Princess Celestia was a fool to leave such a thing in the archives with the other building records. Unfortunately, what Light was specifically after hadn't been marked. But he knew it was in the castle, and with additional research, he had found a vague description of its location. Now he just had to find it. He opened doors along his path, checking each carefully before moving along. He took his time, not wanting to alert the inhabitants. The floor, much like the walls, was made of crystal, so it took all of Light's efforts to walk silently. Even the slightest increase in walking speed would cause audible clicking sounds. He wished he could have gotten his cotton hoof covers.
But your house was being watched for your return, so we couldn't. But this is your special talent, yes. So you'll make do.
Of course I will, friend. It would just help speed this up is all. Light paused to consider his location, then kept moving. It took several minutes, but finally he was opening the door to a larger room that had tall bookshelves along the walls and a mirror in the center. The mirror took the shape of a horseshoe and was hooked up to a large magical apparatus that seemed perpetually powered. Light felt a small shiver of anticipation go down his spine as he approached it. He stepped up onto the dais and examined his reflection. This is definitely the crystal mirror that leads into another dimension.
Without magic, right? And without those annoying princesses?
Right. I've heard it has some magic, but not near as much as Equestria. The creatures there get by with technology. They can't work with magic like we can. Oh, this'll be perfect. We'll use their technology to build a grand ship, a better ship, and we'll build weapons beyond pony comprehension. And we'll come back and rain hellfire down upon any pony who tries to stop...
Don't get ahead of yourself, that's my plan.
Our plan, right? Light asked.
Of course, our plan. Now let's get in there.
Of course, Carnage. Light jumped through. He kept his eyes closed as he traveled to another dimension, not opening them until he thumped down onto hard concrete. He picked himself up, and found that standing on all fours was no longer comfortable. He straightened his back and stood up on two legs, examining his new body. He was now clad in a trench coat with plain jeans and a collared shirt underneath. He also wore well-fitting loafers, and his saddlebags had transformed into a solid black backpack that dangled from one shoulder. Strange. Carnage, are you still there?
I'm here. Now move before we're noticed.
Light adjusted his backpack onto both forelegs. Arms. He had arms, with strange fleshy extensions at the end rather than the hooves he had spent his entire life with. He stared at the end of his arms as he hurried away from the portal, which on this side took the form of an unassuming statue in front of a school. Luckily, it was night here as well, and no one even passed him as he jogged down the sidewalk.
Those are hands,
Carnage muttered as Light kept examining himself.
and those bits you're wiggling are fingers. They're just like the claws of the dragons back in Equestria. Now focus. Over there, that seems to be a park. You can likely find facilities to hide there.
Light nodded, dropping his arms and changing direction to go there. The area was deserted, and as he checked the sky, he figured it had to be past midnight. Locating a small restroom building, he approached it and tried to turn the knob with his magic, but there was no response. There was no flow of magic through his body, and the knob remained still. He instead fumbled with the knob using his fingers, figured out how to grasp it, and opened the door, hurrying inside. After a moment, he turned and locked the door behind him.
This'll do. Now go. Go to the mirror. Now.
Light obeyed without question, approaching the mirror. He almost flinched at the sight of himself. He had no fur, though his mane at least remained. He felt his face, finding only skin the same color as his coat, though paler. His eyes were familiar, but his muzzle was uncomfortably flat, and his ears had drastically shrunk, and he could no longer get them to move like his pony ears could. Carnage stretched out of his neck, eerie red strands of skin flowing out like exposed veins, and forming into a slender neck and angular face with sharp teeth and fierce, intense white eyes.
Ugh, this seems even weaker than the pony body. Look at this. Tiny nose, so breakable. And these limbs. I could snap these like toothpicks.
But hey, there's no alicorns here, Light pointed out.
That's right. No alicorns. Which is good as you are without magic.
Light frowned, feeling his forehead. His lack of a horn was probably the most drastic change. As much as he focused, no magic sparked to life in front of him. But he wasn't worried. He could work without it. He and Carnage had a plan, and together they were unstoppable. Carnage slid thin tendrils around his shoulders, and he shuddered when their sharp points dragged along him, nicking him even through his shirt.
That's right, partner. We are unstoppable. We'll bring this world to its knees. And once we've formed an army, we'll go back to Equestria, and we'll make them pay for what they did to me.
We sure will. Light may have been terrified at first, but being captured by the Life Aura Center was the best thing that could have happened to him. He had made an irreplaceable, lifelong friend, and his future has never looked brighter.
You were right.
Carnage whispered to him.
Together, we will build an army of powerful Clintar, and this world will bow to us. It's what we deserve. It's what we're meant to do. I can feel the desire for power within you. And you're willing to pay for it in blood, aren't you?
Oh yes. Yes, my friend.
Excellent. You're smarter than the others of your kind. Now, why don't we rest here for the night, and in the morning we can explore our future empire.
Sounds like a plan. Light slid his backpack off, and upon confirming it still had all his supplies in it, he found the cleanest corner of the room to sit down in, leaning against the wall and closing his eyes. With a few tugs of the neurons and a dose of hormones, Carnage prodded him asleep. Now left to his own thoughts, he let out a shrill laugh.
Don't you worry, Riot. I'll be back to join you soon enough. And you'll see what I am truly made of when I paint the streets red with equestrian blood!
Chapter 1. Visiting Sunset. This is just going to be a nice trip to the human world to visit a friend, Twilight thought as she headed to the mirror room. Sunset's been attending university, and a lot of her other friends are busy with their schoolwork, so she wanted me to come hang out for a while.
Sounds like fun. And she's feeding us. Very well, I'll behave.
Sure, she's feeding us, if you like ramen noodles.
What are ramen noodles?
Venom asked curiously. Twilight laughed. Oh, only one of the best foods humans have ever created, at least in my opinion.
I'm gathering from your memories that they're very salty and meaty. I look forward to it.
Twilight approached the crystal mirror, checking its augmentations and making sure it was still powered properly. It was working fine, so she walked up to the surface. She felt a coil of apprehension from Venom.
I will be able to go through it, right?
Of course, anyone can go through it. She looked at her reflection, then walked through it. She kept her eyes closed as she passed through dimensions, much more elegantly than the first time she stumbled into the portal. Soon she was stepping out onto concrete, bright sunlight shining down on her, and she straightened onto her back legs, which were now just legs, as her front ones had become jointed differently and were now arms. She held her new hands up, opening and closing them as she got used to having fingers again. Venom purred with delight.
There we go. That's more like it. Oh, we're wearing clothes.
He spun them around, checking out their outfit, and said,
Cute.
Twilight blushed and went around to check the street. A bright red car with a phoenix decal on the front, a 1967 Firebird according to Sunset Shimmer, who had been quite ecstatic to get it judging from their previous journal correspondence, was waiting nearby. Its roof was down, and Sunset leaned over to wave. Twilight! Twilight jogged over. Hey! A little of Venom's influence clouded her judgment, and rather than open the door, she simply vaulted over it and into the passenger seat. Whoa, what is this, Dukes of Hazzard? Sunset asked. What? Never mind. Sunset started driving. How have you been? Oh, things have been great. Though, there was a little something I didn't really get to tell you all about. It all happened so fast. Sunset cast her a concerned look. What was it? Well... Twilight checked their surroundings and said, There was this research company, the Life Aura Center, that was conducting really unethical experiments on sick ponies, using aliens. No kidding? Aliens? Yeah, I know it's pretty crazy, but they captured these aliens that can bond with a host and make them stronger, and even heal them. But the aliens didn't want to be there, and they were putting the patients through a lot of stress and torment, especially since the aliens weren't being fed right, so they kept eating their host from the inside out. Sunset made a face. Ew. So you took down the company, I take it? Yes, it was a lot of work, and I nearly died. Twilight unconsciously felt her stomach. Even though Venom had healed her completely and there were no physical side effects from being run through by Riot, she still remembered the pain. but I pulled through and took down the leader of the center, with Celestia's help. There was a lot of work to do afterward, but things are settled now, and I'm moving past it. Wow. Well, I'm glad it all worked out and that you're okay. Still, the aliens part? That's pretty cool. It is. And don't freak out, but during my first trip to the center, I was bonded to one of them. Sunset glanced at her. You look normal to me. Well, yeah, they can hide under your skin, but if they want, they just kinda drip out of your body and take a form. It's hard to explain, you'd have to see it. Sunset considered, then said, Show me. Maybe not while you're driving. He's kinda creepy when you're not used to him. Him? Twilight shrugged. Well, they don't quite have gender like ours, but he was in a lot of stallions before me and got comfortable being called a he. It doesn't really matter to him, though. Well, I've seen a lot of weird stuff. I think I'll be okay. If you say so. Twilight tapped her left shoulder. Come here, Venom. A tickling sensation crawled across her side and shoulder, and then Venom stretched out of her and looped his neck around her, resting his chin on her shoulder.
Hello, Sunset,
he said. Sunset stared, though she quickly had to look back at the road. Her brows were furrowed and she seemed mildly nauseated, but she was clearly trying to remain polite. Well then, you really do have an alien, parasite thing.
Symbiote!
Venom yelled.
I am not a parasite!
He's not a parasite, Twilight emphasized. Okay, sorry. Sunset kept her eyes on the road, driving in silence for a while, then said, So you're sharing Twilight's body with her?
In a sense. It's as much my body as hers now. We are one. We are Venom.
Okay. Creepy. Told you, Twilight said. No, it's fine. It's just so weird. Like, that he talks and he just melts into your skin like that and eats... What does he eat exactly? Well, at first he was really into eating ponies' brains. Sunset gagged. But he also likes chocolate and raw meat, Twilight continued, scratching under Venom's chin.
Raw meat. So raw it's alive,
he said. Right, but you can handle me eating cooked stuff, right? Twilight teased. And any chocolate is good.
Sure,
he replied.
Milk chocolate is my favorite. I also just...
He wrapped himself partly around her neck and bumped his head against hers.
Adore cuddling your brain when it produces phenethylamine.
Twilight chuckled and nuzzled him. Sunset pulled up to her dorm building and gave Twilight and Venom a puzzled, slightly disturbed stare. Cuddling your brain? Sunset asked. Yes. Twilight opened the door and got out, checking out the other cars in the parking lot with mild interest. She was still fascinated by the vehicles here. He requires a specific chemical that's produced by brains, specifically when you've experienced feelings of happiness and love. So the best way to take care of your symbiote? Love them. Twilight gave Venom's cheek a small kiss, and he wiggled happily. Sunset blinked. Oh, wow. So, are you two... together?
Of course we're together. We're bonded down to a cellular level,
Venom said. No, I mean like... romantically together. Dating. Twilight giggled and rubbed the back of her head, and Venom smiled smugly. I guess you could call it that.
We love each other,
Venom declared. Twilight blushed. Yeah. Sunset shrugged and headed towards the door. Hey, I won't judge. As long as you're happy, I'm happy.
It's really quite terrific,
Venom said.
Ever since Twilight truly started to love me, I haven't felt hunger. It's wonderful. Though we do still eat, as she needs nutrition and it helps me become stronger.
They followed Sunset into the dorm building. It was a weekend, so many students seemed to be out spending time with friends or studying. But according to Sunset, there were still those who preferred to stay in their dorms and chat with friends in the common areas. Venom, you need to be a little more inconspicuous until we get to Sunset's room, Twilight said. You can stay out, but, maybe make yourself look like a snake? He considered, then thinned out his body, wrapping himself more around Twilight's shoulders and concealing the parts where he still had to connect underneath his body. But the rest of him took on a very recognizable viper shape. Viper, huh? Twilight asked, looking at his face.
Pit viper to be specific,
He replied. Whoa, cool, you can shapeshift? Sunset asked. Venom nodded.
within reason. If I know what it looks like, I can imitate its appearance. Though I can't change my color.
I think you'd be cuter as a ball python, Twilight commented.
You're just saying that because they have little puppy faces.
I know, they're adorable. Venom rolled his eyes and subtly shifted his face, imitating a ball python instead. He was pretty convincing, though his eyes stayed the same color and he didn't bother with tongue flicking. Luckily, they didn't pass many people along the way, and those that didn't really pay attention to him, except to maybe smile or shift away. Soon they were in Sunset's room, which reminded Twilight of a small apartment. It's not bad, I guess, Sunset said. I mean, I am a freshman, so I'm expected to be here. But I think I'll try to get an apartment somewhere when I'm a sophomore. Or I might move in with Twilight. The human Twilight. She's actually been here for like a semester longer. She graduated high school partway through the year, since she had already completed all the required classes. So there was no point sitting around doing electives. Oh wow, what degree is she working on? Twilight asked curiously, going to sit on the small couch Sunset had. Sunset pulled over the computer chair from her desk and sat nearby. Try degrees. Plural. She's nuts. She's just like you. She wants to learn everything she possibly can. She's doing this combined physics and computer science degree. It's going to be an Associates of Science, but she says that's just a springboard to more serious majors. I don't even know how she juggles all her classes, but she's doing it and her grades are awesome. But then there's me. Twilight frowned at the other's downhearted tone. You're going for a degree too, right? For music? Yeah, a bachelor's of art and music, but music was always more of a hobby for me. I mean, I like to think I'm really good at singing and playing guitar, and the classes have been interesting, but I'm not sure I can make a good career out of it. Twice suggested I'd take some STEM classes too, and I'm looking into it. STEM? Science, technology, engineering, and math. Basically, those are the fields that have a lot of job opportunities, and apparently not enough people are getting degrees in them these days. But I'm not surprised. They can be pretty tough, and I don't think they're right for everyone. I might be interested in some kind of engineering job someday, but I'm not sure. I spent so much time studying magic in Equestria. I kind of want to get back into that. Sunset gazed at her own palm. My friends and I still have equestrian magic, and we've incorporated it into our daily lives. But surely we can do more with it? Just see how much magic has reached Earth? There's so much untapped potential there, and I'm pretty sure Twi plans on researching it more. Twilight nodded in understanding. Yeah, I can definitely feel low levels of magic in this dimension. Not near as much as Equestria has, and it's very subtle, but it's here. She relaxed back, and Venom shifted into his usual appearance, sliding himself down to curl up on her lap. She idly ran her fingers against his head. So what are the others up to? Sunset was quiet for a moment, distracted by watching Venom. Then she tore her gaze away. Sorry, I'm still trying to get used to him. I mean, you have an actual alien bonded to you. It's probably one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. And I've seen Pinkie Pie eat an entire can of whipped cream in one sitting. Oh, that's all right. But don't worry, he's very kind to me, and I'm pretty used to having him here. It's comforting knowing that there's always someone right there next to me to talk to. Sunset nodded, and then said, Anyway, so our friends. A lot of us ended up coming to Canterlot University. It's huge. There are so many different programs, and there's pretty much something for everyone. They even do classes for those who just want to get certified in a trade in a few weeks or months. Rainbow got here with a sports scholarship. She plays for CU's soccer team, and she's really good. It helps her that her magic gives her a bit of a speed boost. though it took her a while to learn to reel it in enough to be reasonable. She'll raise some eyebrows if she goes shooting through the field at light speed, you know. Twilight laughed. Yeah. So, she's on the soccer team, but part of the conditions for the scholarship says that she needs to also be maintaining a passing score in all her classes. Now, she could have picked some easy stuff, but get this. She's really been looking ahead. She said that she won't want to do soccer forever, and she has higher aspirations. Much higher. Her wings? Sunset gave her friends, what the fuck? Sunset gave her hands a few small flaps to emphasize. They've pretty much made her fall in love with flying, but there's only so much you can do with her own wing power. She wants to be a pilot, so she's part of the ROTC and going for a bachelor's in aerospace engineering. And once she gets her degree, she's going to commission as an officer in the Air Force. Whoa! Twilight was pleasantly surprised to hear that. That's pretty awesome. But, what's the ROTC? Oh, right, we don't really have that in Equestria. It means Reserve Officer Training Corps. Basically, it prepares college students to go right into the military once they graduate. So she kinda skips the basic training part and starts off going to school for her specific career. Becoming a pilot takes a lot of work, though, so I hope she's able to handle it. Yeah, Twilight agreed. But I think she's got what it takes. The Rainbow Dash in Equestria is an active duty member of the Wonderbolts, and she's doing great there. I get the feeling she's gonna make it a lifetime career. That's good to hear. Let me think. Rarity is also here. She's majoring in fashion, big surprise. It's pretty intensive, though. She's been learning about all these different styles of clothing, how to manufacture them both by hand and with machines. There's even history involved. She's also been taking business classes, learning how to manage a company, because she wants to run her own shop one day with her own line of dresses and accessories. I'm not surprised. How's she handling college life, though? Oh, you know Rarity. She's making connections everywhere, and everyone wants to be friends with her. But she's not letting the popularity go to her head at all. She has this very confident, dignified way of going about her day, so nothing really bothers her. She helps people whenever she can, but doesn't let anyone take advantage of her. I really admire that. She is very admirable. Sunset continued. Fluttershy is probably going to be here longer than anyone. She's working on becoming a veterinarian. Oh wow. Twilight thought about what all the pony veterinarians had to learn. That probably takes longer for human vets than pony ones, huh? Since this world is so much more advanced medically, there's a lot to learn. Oh yeah, but she's really passionate about it, and with her ability to understand animals, she can actually talk to her patients about where they're feeling pain. She'll do good as a vet. Lots of good, Twilight agreed. How about Applejack? She isn't coming here, right? No, her family's farm makes plenty of money, so she's happy to just work there. She does a lot of the management now, budgeting and such, but she said even farms have been changing, and she might just take a few classes to learn more about agriculture and business. She doesn't want to be left behind, but huge commercial farms are starting to affect her profits. You should hear her going off about all the unnecessary automated systems people are using now. Twilight giggled. I'm glad she's doing good, though. How about Pinky? Pinky's got a pretty good job working at this bakery downtown, but she comes here to take culinary classes. I think she's working towards a degree in culinary arts, but with only doing the classes part-time, it'll take her a while to actually finish them. She doesn't care, though. You know, Pinky, she'd rather do things the fun way. Yeah. I'm so glad for you guys. You've been learning and preparing for the future. It's great to hear. Meanwhile, I've just been running my school and spending time with Venom. And of course, helping the other symbiotes adapt to Equestria. There's more of them? Sunset asked. Yeah, lots. Twilight filled her in on the whole story, telling her about all the others that were used. And the experiments, and how the survivors now had permanent hosts and were very happy. So all of them are fine with their new life? Sunset wondered. Seems kind of weird they would switch sides so quickly. The Clintar tend to adapt to the ideals of their hosts, but not all of them are totally satisfied. Scream, who's with Fluttershy, is pretty aggressive and misses the old days, though she's learning to channel her energy into more constructive hobbies. She still picks fights a lot, though. Then Phage, with Applejack, gets bored easily and keeps trying to encourage her into dangerous situations just for entertainment. Sunset nodded. I see. Well, as long as they don't get out of control, I suppose. They won't, Twilight replied. Even if certain things about Equestria bother them, they like having strong, willing hosts and want to stay with them. That's good. So, on a slightly different subject, when you took on Riot for the last time, that must have been awful, how we just stabbed you like that. I'm so sorry you went through that. Through all of it. Twilight gave a half shrug, chuckling. Hey, had Riot needed to be taken down? We had to stop those experiments. The pain was worth it.
So brave for someone who got their lung punctured.
Venom cooed, nuzzling her cheek.
And so strong-willed. How you held on and kept fighting until you simply couldn't keep your head up. You were amazing.
Twilight blushed and gave his face a quick kiss. I didn't really feel amazing bleeding out all over the floor.
I'm sure you didn't, but you're amazing nonetheless.
Aw, you two are so cute, Sunset said, smiling. I mean, you're also the weirdest couple I've ever seen, no offense. But you're cute. No offense taken, Twilight replied. And thank you. You know, when I first bonded with Venom, I never imagined our relationship would develop like this. But he really grew on me. We became fast friends, and I realized how much he cared about me. And I'm just comfortable, you know? He's someone I can just sit here with, completely quiet, and be content.
I've never felt so happy to sit around and do nothing until I met her.
Venom confessed. Then he groaned.
I'm such a hopeless romantic.
Twilight smiled and rested an arm around him. Though he could be fearsome, even when serving Riot, he was always more cautious compared to his teammates, more sympathetic. For countless years he had to hide it. But with Twilight, he could open up. She appreciated him trusting her enough to show his true feelings. Twilight and Venom ended up spending a few hours with Sunset. They talked for a while about the Life Force Center situation, and the legal proceedings that were still in progress. Then just settled down to watch a movie while eating chicken-flavored ramen. Venom immediately fell in love with it and ended up eating 3 packets of it before Twilight got him to stop. It's okay, you can get dozens of these for like $2, Sunset said. Still, I don't want him to eat all your food, because he will if you don't watch him, Twilight replied. Venom huffed.
If you don't want me eating all your food, then stop making it so delicious.
When the movie was over, Sunset confessed to needing to finish an essay, and Twilight decided to get out of her hair. Sunset drove her back to Canterlot High and got out of the car to walk to the portal with her. They exchanged a hug, and Sunset said, Promise me you'll find time to write next time you have to battle space aliens. I'm always happy to come in there and help you. Twilight chuckled. Of course. But until I have another battle with space aliens, I'll just write to you about other things. Sounds good. See you later. See you. Twilight waved, and Venom lifted a tendril to wave as well, and then they jumped through the portal. Sunset stood there for a few moments to make sure no one had noticed their departure, then headed to her car. She wasn't gonna lie. It would be pretty cool to have a symbiote. Musing about everything Twilight and Venom had told her, she drove back to the university. Chapter 2. The New Host. Once morning arrived, Light Touch decided to explore this strange new world. The humans were odd, the way they walked about on 2 legs and manipulated their surroundings with their hands, how every single one of them wore clothing, to say nothing of their technology. They had small portable phones that seemed able to perform the functions of a dozen gadgets. Gas-powered vehicles in many sizes and designs were everywhere, on huge paved roads that seemed to go anywhere you could desire. Even the things that were familiar were different. He passed odd-smelling food stalls, saw weird pictures and headlines on the papers and magazines he glanced over. He had a feeling he had a lot to learn if he wanted to blend in. Light was staring curiously through the window of a clothing store when Carnage snapped at him.
We don't have time to waste. As you said, we need to learn more about this world. Let's do some research.
Light pulled back from the window. I think I saw a newspaper stand. He hurried over to a metal box with newspaper stacked inside and tried to open it, only for the door to catch and not open. He tilted his head, giving it a few tugs before realizing the papers cost money. Of course, he whispered. He took his backpack off and searched it, but the few bits he had were still bits. He doubted this human machine would even accept them. He sighed and put his backpack on once more, instead just kneeling and looking at the front page.
"This city seems to be named Canterlot,"
Carnage said.
"just like the Canterlot back in Equestria."
Princess Twilight reported that there are many similarities between here and Equestria, Light replied. There are the same city names between our worlds, and every single pony in Equestria has a human counterpart here. It's very interesting, and even she's not sure why that is.
"In that case, we must be careful not to run into your counterpart. Then again, if we do..."
Carnage's hunger flared up, and Light found himself licking his lips.
"We can take care of him easily."
I really don't want to have to eat myself.
"Hush!"
Carnage focused back on the paper.
"What's this? Local heroes protect city from..." "That's those ponies! The ones in your memories, the elements of harmony. That's them as humans, isn't it?"
Huh? Light looked at the photo on the front page. It was in bright color and depicted 7 young women. They were called women here, if he recalled correctly. One of them looked only vaguely familiar, but the other 6 looked just like the elements of harmony that every pony in Equestria knew, and he recognized them instantly. Twilight Sparkle, Rarity, Rainbow Dash, Applejack, Fluttershy, and Pinkie Pie. They were waving to a cheering crowd. That's them, all right. Weird. They look the same, but so different. I don't think I'll ever get used to those flat human faces.
"According to this article, they have magic here, and most of them are attending a local university. Well, that won't do. If they're anything like their counterparts, they'll try to stop us, and I won't let that happen. We need to take them down first."
Carnage seized control of their body and stood them up, going over to the nearest human and tapping their shoulder. "You, how do I get to Canterlot University?" The man gave him an affronted look, but said, It's a few miles that way," and pointed. "Excellent. You people are so helpful." Carnage spun and marched in that direction. "You're welcome," the other called, sounding annoyed. Light commented, I don't think we should refer to them as you people. We need to blend in."
"Oh, who cares? What's he going to do about it?"
They made their way through the city, Carnage taking most of the control and occasionally stopping random pedestrians to ask for more directions, and also asking about the girls in the newspaper. He quickly learned that they were local celebrities. They were practically superheroes, who have saved the people of the city from magical oddities on multiple occasions. Yet despite their fame, the girls were humble and just trying to make regular lives for themselves after graduating high school. "Do we have to kill them?" Light asked. "Why not get them on our side? With their power, we could be unstoppable."
"I don't have the means to keep them under my control right now,"
Carnage snapped.
"but they'll serve a better purpose. Fuel. I hope they taste better than ponies. I've been dying for a proper meal."
Light wanted to shudder at the ravenous hunger that swept through him. During his brief imprisonment at the museum, he had been fed, but none of it seemed to satisfy Carnage. But when they broke free and took down a few guards along the way, that had finally sated the alien creature. He made himself ignore the discomfort, though. He was part of something far bigger than himself now. Carnage promised to give him everything he ever wanted, and he was going to serve him faithfully. Part of him was a little guilty over abandoning his loyalty to Celestia, but he just couldn't resist the glorious future Carnage had shown him. One where their races have a powerful and unstoppable symbiotic alliance that all their enemies will fall before. Light has seen Equestria threatened countless times throughout his life, and knew the symbiotes were capable of preventing that from ever happening again. Sure, the way they planned to take control was not without its own violence, but it would be followed by an era of such peace and prosperity that it would be seen as necessary. Every pony will understand. It was worth betraying his old boss and destroying some lives for the good of Equestria's many future generations, he told himself. A notion that Carnage immediately agreed with, praising his intelligence and sensibility, making him even more certain this was the right decision. It took a while, but finally they reached the university. The campus was huge, boasting several buildings and dorms, and Light had no idea where to start.
It's Sunday here, which means they're likely not in classes, and may be out in the city or studying somewhere on campus. If we find any one of those 7 girls, we can search their memories for the rest before we eat them.
Or just ask some other students? Light suggested as they watched a few athletic-looking students run by, throwing a football to each other.
Or that.
Carnage headed onto the campus, waving down the athletes. Hey, any of you seen Rainbow Dash or her friends? The boys glanced at each other and shrugged, but one said, "Oh yeah, I think she's out on the track doing some laps." "Thank you so much." Chuckling at how easy that was, Carnage looked around, wondering where the track was. The student pointed, and he smiled and jogged that way.
Too easy. These humans are just as trusting as ponies are. It will be their downfall.
I hope you don't plan on murdering a famous person in plain sight. We don't want to attract attention to ourselves.
Oh, please, I can handle anything this world can throw at me. You've seen what I can do.
Yeah, but I still think we should keep a low profile for now.
Think whatever you like. I'm going to do what I want to do.
Light would have frowned if he was the one in control of their body. Sometimes he wondered how much of a partnership this really was. But he said nothing. It would be okay. Carnage was just very straightforward. He was used to it by now. When they reached the track, they saw that it was fairly busy, especially as it surrounded a football field, where a team was currently practicing. They couldn't see the rainbow-haired woman anywhere, and Carnage groaned.
Must have missed her. Gah!
Their stomach grumbled, and he clutched it.
We must feed. I don't care on who.
Okay, how about this? We, find one of those vending machine things, and you use one of your tendrils to sneak a snack out of it when no one's looking.
I suppose that will do for now. And then we will resume our search for those magical girls.
Carnage stalked down the sidewalk, fingers clenching angrily until he came across a vending machine. He stepped up to it, made sure no one was looking, and slid a hand inside. He let his tendrils emerge from the ends of his fingers, snagging several bags from their racks and yanking them down. He retrieved them and hurried away, finding a tree to sit under as he examined his loot. So many carbs, Light said distastefully. Most of it was chips and crackers.
Fuel is fuel.
Carnage tore the bags open and shoveled the food into his mouth. He ate it so fast it was a miracle he didn't choke, and Light nervously made them glance up every so often, but no one seemed to spare them a glance. The one human who did pass close enough to see their frenzied eating merely muttered, "Man, that's a mood," and kept walking.
Stop being paranoid. We're fine.
Carnage growled. He examined a thin stick of what looked to be red flesh.
Beef jerky? Is this meat?
I think so. It looks so gross. Carnage considered that, then grinned and ripped the plastic off, biting into the beef jerky. His eyes widened at the savory flavor.
It is meat! Finally!
It was with a sinking sensation that Light remembered what beef was. Of course, as an equestrian, he had no reason to use the word, as those it referred to were every bit as sapient as he was, and found the term highly offensive. But he knew it nonetheless. Beef came from cows. He would have puked if not for Carnage having his motor control on lockdown. Carnage sensed his nausea anyway and scoffed.
I doubt the creatures are sapient here. Though if they are, perhaps these humans are more brutal than I thought. Either way, this is a fine treat, despite how dead and processed it is.
He quickly finished off the meat, licked his fingers clean, and stood, kicking the wrappers carelessly aside.
Now then, back to our hunt.
Light could feel that the other had more energy now, but he found that it hadn't done much for his own strength. Was Carnage taking all the nutrition for himself?
Of course I am.
The other responded dismissively to that thought.
I'll take care of you later, but right now, I need all the strength I can get. That isn't a problem, is it?
Light felt the other's confidence wash over him, visions of everything they'll accomplish together flowing through his mind. And he agreeably replied, "Not at all, my friend." He really did need to stop doubting Carnage.
That's right. I said I'd unlock your full potential, and I will.
Silently, Carnage checked on his host's vitals. They were even weaker than they were yesterday. Not surprising. Light wasn't a very good match for him, and his immune system was trying to fight off Carnage's cells. It wasn't succeeding, but the energy it was using was already affecting the equine's health. Carnage didn't care. He would deal with that in time. He metabolized a tiny bit more of the other's liver and brain, using his connection with Light's nerves to prevent him from feeling any discomfort from it, and headed for the nearest dormitory. He asked around, and while nearly everyone knew who he was talking about, none could give him specific directions. Rainbow had apparently left just a few minutes ago with her friends to go somewhere. Carnage was able to obtain descriptions of their vehicles, but upon searching the parking lots, couldn't find them. They must have left the campus altogether. Frustrated, he decided to come back in a few hours. He left the campus and wandered aimlessly about the city, learning its layout and already planning how he was going to devastate the planet. He especially liked imagining how those soft-looking humans were going to taste. And one day he would spawn more Clintar, and they would have endless prey to feast on, and could hunt for the perfect bodies among these fragile primates. And then they would go and liberate their kind from the ponies and resume their mission. Once a couple hours had passed, Carnage returned to the university. He was hearing very little from his host now, but that was normal. They always seemed to go quiet after spending long enough with him, seeing his fantasies and listening to his raves and rants. He had more than enough imagination to keep them occupied. Or perhaps they were simply in awe of his brilliance. Either way, he was glad for the silence. Carnage kept his thoughts concealed from Light as he considered what he was going to do once he found one of the elements. Of course, he was going to eat most of them, but he also wanted to take one of them as host. He had pushed Light's body to its breaking point, escaping the museum. Not that he was letting the other know that, but several body systems were shutting down, and he had eaten away most of his organs. It was coming time for him to jump to a healthier body. And why not choose one of those humans with magical abilities? He could infiltrate their friend group, get each of the others alone, and dispose of them, and then he'll have no competition. Now to just get Light on board with the plan.
Listen up,
He said to his host. Once he had the other's attention, he continued.
You and I both know your body isn't a suitable host for me, so I'm going to need to transfer into one of the elements. You will continue serving me, but your body will be your own again.
Okay, got it.
You will assist me in convincing one of these creatures to accept me. It's easier when they don't fight back.
I'll do what I can.
Yes, you will.
Carnage once again decided to lurk near the dorms, and this time he was lucky. He saw one of the girls from the newspaper approaching. She wasn't one of the Equestrian elements, but she nonetheless had magic here and was formidable as the rest of her friends. Light paid close attention to her fiery red and yellow hair and said, I swear I know who she is. Where have I... Carnage immediately dove into Light's memories, searching far back to when he first started working for Celestia, and saw a pony with a very similar mane style and the same piercing green eyes.
She was a student of Celestia, wasn't she?
Light gasped out loud. Sunset Shimmer? The girl froze, staring at him. Yeah? Can I help you? Light grinned, moving toward her. It was all coming back to him now. Sunset had been Celestia's student, and then she grew resentful when it became clear that Celestia didn't see her as worthy of becoming an alicorn, and then she ran away through the crystal mirror. This wasn't the human world, Sunset. This was the same pony one. She had to be. Sunset, it's me, Light Touch. Remember, Celestia caught me breaking into the restricted section of the Royal Archives and was impressed, so she hired me to be a spy for her? Sunset's eyes widened with recognition. Oh, Oh, wow, Light Touch, yeah! I thought you looked familiar. She took his hand, shaking it. So good to see you. What are you doing here? Well, it's a long story. Why don't we go inside? Yeah, absolutely. Carnage sat back and let Light handle things. He just watched through his eyes as they went inside, up the stairs and into one of the rooms. Sunset invited Light to sit on the couch, and he made up a story about just wanting to visit his human world he's heard so much about from Twilight. It really is a weird place compared to Equestria, but you'll get used to it, Sunset said. Personally, I'm so used to the internet, I don't know what I would do without it. If I went back to Equestria, I'd have to bring it with me. Internet? Yeah, I've seen some of it already. It's fascinating what these humans have come up with. Carnage gave Light a small nudge, making a suggestion to him on what to say and reminding him of the plan. Light rubbed his neck, clearing his throat. Sunset, listen. I haven't been entirely truthful. I actually came here because I was escaping the Life Aura Center. Life Aura Center? The one that was experimenting on ponies with those aliens? That got Carnage's attention, and he was in sync with Light as they demanded. How do you know about that? Well, Twilight, the pony Twilight, she visited me just yesterday and told me about it. It's crazy that you managed to escape that place, but I'm glad you did. It sounds awful. So then, you know about the aliens, Light said slowly. Sunset nodded, and he said, Okay, good. That's good, because, you see... He found himself laughing. I have one of them, he gestured at his chest. I have one, and he's actually not compatible with my body, and so he needs a better host. Oh. Sunset was taken aback. I mean, I'd offer, but this is also new to me. I might need some time to think about it, if you can hold off for a bit. No! Light shouted, spurred on by Carnage's outrage. He cleared his throat, and said in a more pleading tone, Sunset, please, he's getting weaker the longer he stays with me. Sunset nervously messed with her hair as she thought about it. She didn't know Light Touch very well, but she could see the desperation on his face, and there was no way he'd lie about this sort of thing. If Celestia trusted him, she trusted him. Well, Twilight is also hosting one of the symbiotes. I know they can't survive in our world without a compatible host, so... Okay, if he really can't stay in you, he can share my body. Carnage could hardly believe his luck. Not only would this human likely have some new information about the rest of the Clintar for him, she was willing to receive him. He immediately began stretching out of Light, speaking for himself now.
Don't mind if I do.
Sunset flinched at the sight of him. He looked more vicious than Venom did, especially with that blood-red shade of flesh. Whoa, wasn't expecting you to come out so fast. Hi. She relaxed, reaching out her hand. Nice to meet you. I'm sure you know if you were in his head, but I'm Sunset Shimmer.
Hello, Sunset Shimmer. I am Carnage.
Carnage connected to Sunset without any prompting, and as he moved towards her, he used his last links of light to soak all the energy he could out of him. He felt the other waver, and smugly told him to be happy he died for a grand purpose. He spent a few moments reveling in the other's betrayal and horror. Then he fully disconnected, surging into Sunset's body. Ah! She scrambled back, eyes squeezing shut as what felt like razor blades dragged along her skin and sank deep underneath. Her breath quickened, and her heart beat harder, blood rushing in her ears, and a sudden dizziness overcame her. The last thing she was aware of was loud laughter in her head, and then everything swirled, and she blacked out. Chapter 3. A Rough Start. Sunset gasped, eyes shooting open as she sat up. Her skin tingled, and she rubbed her arms, shakily looking around her dorm. Did she fall asleep?
I may have been a little rough with you,
A voice suddenly said in her head, and she jerked. Who? As she woke up more fully, she remembered. An old employee of Equestria coming to talk to her. A bright red alien creature. Carnage. Carnage? She asked tentatively. Red tendrils of skin slid out of her body, linking together into a slender neck and then a sharply angled face. Large, opal eyes glinted at her over a maw filled with razor-sharp teeth.
Yes. Hello, Sunset. I can't thank you enough for your cooperation.
Sunset swallowed, examining him as she tried to get used to this. Twilight had told me it didn't hurt, being connected to one of you.
Did she?
Carnage made a note to search her memories for more information, but right now he was focused on the present.
Well, are you in pain?
Sunset found that no, she wasn't. In fact, she felt more alert and energetic than ever before. Maybe Twilight just meant that things didn't hurt after the bonding? Not now. But it hurt when you connected to me. I mean, I passed out.
You were probably just in shock, that's all. Perfectly normal.
Carnage turned to look at the floor, and Sunset followed his gaze. She gasped when she saw that Light Touch had collapsed and slid down next to him, grasping his shoulders.
Don't bother. He's dead.
Sunset jerked her head toward him. Dead?
Yes, that's what I said. Dead. He was weak and died as soon as I left him. He's as dead as beef jerky. Speaking of which...
Carnage licked his lips, and Sunset shuddered when she saw how long and slimy his tongue was.
Free dinner.
What? You can't just eat him! Carnage glared at her.
Be reasonable, Sunset. He's not from this world. What would you do with the body? We must dispose of it. We can make sure it's never found. Equestria believes him to be dead anyway.
Sunset gulped, but her stomach churned with an unnatural hunger. As horrible as it was, Carnage was right. There was no record of Light Touch here. Not this version of him, anyway. There really was only one way to ensure the body wasn't found, that his death wasn't traced back to her. She closed her eyes and turned away. She felt like she was going to start sobbing if she looked at the body any longer. Okay, just do it then. She covered her ears as the other messly began chomping at the body, but that didn't completely block out the nauseating sound of wet slurping and crunching. And even more disgusting, she was able to feel it seeming to move right through him and into her stomach, and she covered her mouth as she fought the urge to throw up. But she also felt it soothing the other's hunger. It only took a few moments, then Carnage was done and rumbling with satisfaction.
There we are. Feels good, doesn't it? Do you feel the power?
She cautiously looked at him. His fierce eyes were locked onto hers, and she saw a small trail of blood rush from his teeth. He licked it off. I do feel stronger, she admitted. But that's an awful way to get power. He scoffed.
Oh, he was dead anyway. Not eating him wouldn't have fixed it. And that is the sort of fuel we will need if I am to remain healthy.
Is it normal for hosts to just die when one of you leave? She asked nervously.
Not at all. As I said, he was weak. He was dying anyway, his body overexerting himself to try to sustain mine. As soon as I left, he had no energy left, and everything shut down. But you won't have that problem. You are strong. We fit together just fine.
I think I need I need to lie down. Sunset numbly walked over to her bed, collapsing onto it and rubbing her temples. Her body shook slightly as she tried not to cry over what she just saw.
Of course,
Carnage said as gently as he could muster, forming a hand to run against her hair.
Rest. I have a lot to think about anyway.
She nodded and buried her face into a pillow, and he could sense her eyes stinging and her shaking getting worse as she fought back sobs. She seemed unable to stop thinking about what he did, and he decided to just ignore her emotional turmoil and immerse himself in her memories, wanting to learn more about her. He hissed when he saw Twilight, But what really caught his attention was Venom. He knew he had gotten free of the Life Aura Center, but he had hiked out in Twilight Sparkle? His anger only grew as he listened to their story of taking down the center, fighting Riot, and finally killing him. He gnashed his teeth at the thought of his fellow Clintar turning against their brave leader and helping the ponies. And to think that they all joined those pathetic creatures? That they were giving up the invasion for cozy domestic lives? Carnage seethed, pushing his mind away from the disgusting memories. The other symbiotes were clearly too far gone. He would have to eliminate everyone from his team and start over fresh with his own uncorrupted spawn. He began adjusting his plan. He would build strength with Sunset, eating each of her friends from this world to absorb their powers. And then he could go back to Equestria, consume the traitors, and finally confront Venom. He would make him suffer slowly and painfully for starting the rebellion. "You all right?" Sunset mumbled from underneath him. "You feel angry." Carnage snapped his attention back to the present, and did a quick mental check to make sure she hadn't heard anything. But it seemed she was only sensing his emotions. He curtly replied,
"Just thinking about what happened to the people who were captured. I am fine."
It took all his self-control to not just go on a rampage gathering strength right now. But no, he needed to get this creature to trust him. A willing host was so much easier to control than a defiant one. He decided to go further into Sunset's memories, learning about her past and what made her into the person she was today. He analyzed her personality, her quirks and her fears, what she liked to do and what she loathed. He knew he would have to be able to perfectly imitate her whenever he seized control.
"You have the potential for greatness inside you,"
he said as he examined her memory of becoming a powerful demon.
"You're ambitious like me. We will make an excellent team. I can get you all the strength you've ever wanted. We can be strong and beautiful together, just like when you became that phoenix-like goddess to save your dear friend Twy."
Sunset lifted her head, wiping tears from her eyes. "Goddess is a pretty strong word," she said. But she did find herself longing to feel that power flow through her again. It felt so warm, so right for her. It felt like what she imagined being an alicorn was like.
Yet it fits, doesn't it? Think of what you could do with all that magic. You're a hero to this city, but imagine being a hero to the entire world, leading it into a bright new future.
It does sound nice.
Yes, it does. Trust me, Sunset, and we'll do great things together, just like Twilight and Venom did.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I'm still creeped out by... you know. Sunset leaned up and gestured towards the floor where Light's body had lain. Carnage resisted the urge to groan as he felt a pang of sadness from her. She was still torn up over that. But Twilight said you don't need to eat people. You'll be fine with raw meat and chocolate and affection from your host. So we'll make this work.
Live prey tastes so much better.
Yes, but it's wrong.
What if they deserve it?
I don't think anyone deserves being eaten alive, no matter what they've done.
I'm sure there are some especially nasty humans who would deserve such a punishment.
Carnage brought up a few of her memories about appalling dictators and criminals throughout history. Sunset shook her head, mentally shoving them away. Well, yeah, who doesn't like a good torture fantasy about bad people, but I never actually want to do that. It's not who I am. Carnage decided to relent, for now. He'll ease her into it, but he could feel that darkness deep within her. He would bring it out one day, and he didn't care if it was willingly or by force.
Fine. We don't have to finally live out your justice fantasies. We don't have to travel the city, you completely concealed beneath my form, and thus unable to be identified, able to punish whoever we want. We'll stick to long dead animals and chocolate instead.
Sunset sighed and laid back down. You know, you're a lot more brutal than I was expecting.
My team came to Equus with the intent to enslave the entire population and use them as hosts to produce armies of Clintar, while feeding on those too weak or rebellious to host us. Of course I'm brutal.
But you're like the others, right? Sunset asked. You don't want to do that anymore?
Of course not.
Carnage lied.
For now, I just want to recover my strength. Perhaps one day rejoin my people in Equestria. No more.
Alright then. Man, it's kinda early, but I'm beat. I think I'm just gonna go ahead and go to sleep.
Sleep then. I'll watch over you.
Sunset nodded and slipped under the covers, and Carnage used his link to make her fall asleep in seconds. Once she was out, he withdrew himself into her body, fully immersing himself in her memories again. She didn't suspect him at all. She trusted that pony princess so much. It would be her downfall. He began learning about her friends. He would have to be very careful in how he disposed of those 6. Sunset elected not to tell her friends about Carnage yet. She still needed some time to figure out how to break the news to them. They didn't know anything about the symbiotes, and it may be better if she had Twilight with her when she told them. Plus, she wanted to sort out her own feelings about Carnage first. He was surprisingly quiet throughout the school week, apparently content to observe everything she did, but she got an uneasy vibe from him. He was like a persistent dark cloud always at the back of her mind. And whenever he did talk, it was usually to make shockingly cruel remarks about the people around her, or to carry out a scathing commentary on whatever subject she was learning. And several times he simply urged her to lash out at someone or break something. It was in his nature to be this way, he claimed. She did her best to find some common ground with him, but his way of thinking was simply alien to her. She couldn't help but wonder how Twilight and Venom managed to make things work. She groaned as a headache stabbed at her temples, dropping her head into her hands. That was another thing. Carnage always seemed to be listening to her thoughts, and his anger would spike into physical pain when she thought about Venom, but he refused to tell her why. Sunset was already frustrated with Carnage's presence by the time the weekend arrived, and as soon as she walked into her dorm room on Friday after the last class of the day, she firmly demanded, "Okay, get out here and look at me." With a sensation like hundreds of needles dragging across her skin, he emerged from her body and faced her, opal eyes narrowed and teeth glinting.
Yes, Sunset?
I think we need to have a talk. Sunset crossed the room to the couch and dropped onto it, crossing her arms. The other fixed her with a steady stare, unblinking, unperturbed.
About what?
You're in my head. I think you know. He growled.
You're regretting our bond.
Kinda, yeah. Twilight made it seem so... Ah! She winced as pain shot through her skull again, and she saw the other noticeably snarl. Quit doing that! First off, what's your problem with Twilight and Venom? He was silent for a moment. Then he said,
Let's just say Venom and I had our disagreements back when we worked together. Now, what's this about regretting our bond with each other?
It seemed like a good idea. I know you can't survive here alone, and I really wanted to help you. Especially since your previous host, well... Sunset gestured vaguely and groaned, rubbing her stomach. She still got upset and nauseous remembering it, almost able to taste the poor stallion in the back of her throat. Anyway, I wanted to help you recover your strength. I could tell whatever that company in Equestria did to you really hurt you. But this isn't going to work if you're going to keep saying all those cruel things in my head, and pushing me to act violently for no reason, and just... She dragged her nails against her arms, as even now his rage swirled through her and joined in with her own emotions. This is supposed to be a mutual symbiosis, right? That's what Twilight called it. We're supposed to benefit each other. Otherwise, you're just a rude parasite. He snapped, and for a moment more of his tendrils surged out and formed arms, which he extended towards her as if he was going to seize her neck. She jerked back, but he stopped himself, claws inches from her throat. He curled them and dropped his arms, the skin melting away and becoming tendrils once more.
You want some kind of benefit? Have you not noticed how much stronger you are now? How much more intelligent you are? How I've been feeding you all the knowledge you need for those pathetic classes that pass for higher education here?
Sunset's heart was beating hard, but she refused to let him intimidate her. He needed her, and they both knew it. So she took a deep breath and said, "Let's get something straight. Never threaten me like that again. You try to hurt me, and I'll make sure you regret it." He growled, telling himself he was going to make her suffer greatly later. But saying so out loud wasn't the pragmatic choice right now, so he replied,
"My temper got the best of me. It won't happen again."
"It better not. If you don't start behaving, I will do whatever it takes to remove you from me, and you can find someone else to tolerate your temper. Now, you need to stop causing me pain. We're a team now. Let's act like it." He settled slightly, deciding he could use this.
"That's right, Shimmer,"
he said in as calm a voice as he could muster.
"We are a team. Truth is, I've become temperamental because I'm very hungry. You can feel it, right?"
Her stomach growled, and she wrapped her arms around it, though she also tilted her head with confusion. "I've been eating 3 meals a day."
"It's not enough. I require meat, livers, brains. We must hunt."
"I told you we can't eat people. We can survive on—"
"Chocolate and cooked meat isn't doing it for me. We do not have the sort of bond that produces enough of your own brain chemicals for me to feed on. At least, not without me depriving you entirely of phenethylamine and sending you spiraling into a depression. No. I need to get it from others. We need to hunt."
Ugh. Sunset turned and threw herself on her stomach, dragging over a pillow to bury her face into. "That's so wrong. We can't just kill people."
"Oh, don't be like that. This is a college and it's no doubt full of scum. If we simply attend one of those so-called frat parties—"
"No." She pushed herself up, glaring at him. "I can tell you're not going to let this go. If you absolutely must have a human, we can, I don't know," she sighed, "sneak into some local prison or something. Find someone we know for absolute sure was convicted of some terrible crime, and—"
"You don't have to tell me twice."
He disappeared back under her skin, and with a yelp she found herself jumping to her feet and running to grab her keys before throwing open the door. Sunset was briefly stunned at how quickly and easily he had seized control of her body, and they were halfway down the stairs before she stopped him and asked, "Wait, where are we going?"
"The library to do research."
"Why the library? I have a perfectly good laptop back—"
"Don't be stupid. If we use your laptop to find our victim and then go and kill them, that can incriminate you."
"I really doubt it'd be traced back to—"
"Maybe not, but it could be. And why take that chance? We're going to the library and using a public computer that isn't connected to your identity."
Sunset didn't argue further, but she did mentally shoulder Carnage's will aside so they could at least share control of her body as they made their way outside. She felt irritation from him, but didn't dwell on it. Maybe things were rough between Twilight and Venom at first, too. They'll make this work. Eventually. Chapter 4. Massacre. Sunset had tons of reservations, but she said nothing as she and Carnage selected a computer towards the back of the library, where they could have their back to a wall and no one else was nearby. They sank into the chair, and she let him take control of the search. He immediately sent their fingers flying across the keys, and she heard him grumble darkly in his thoughts about how primitive Earth computers were. He brought up Google and began searching for the nearest prison. He found that Canterlot had one on the outskirts of the city and surrounded by razor wire according to the photos. There was only one road in or out, and it passed a gatehouse which would no doubt have armed guards. Carnage didn't seem convinced with the security, just noting it and moving on to a new search for people who had been convicted and sent there. Luckily, arrest records and court cases were all very public, and anyone who could find them would if they just looked.
"What about this?"
he asked Sunset.
"This man beat his wife so severely she was hospitalized. Lots of evidence. He confessed, very cut and dry. I can eat him, right? Is he bad enough for your delicate sense of justice?"
Sunset hesitated. Sure, there was no doubt the person was cruel, but I don't know. What he did was bad, but I think he could change, you know?
Ugh, this isn't some children's cartoon. Not every bad guy just changes for the better. We can get rid of him right now. That poor wife of his will have nothing to fear if we do. What if he gets released and attacks someone again? Don't you want to prevent that?
I don't want to kill him, Sunset thought, narrowing her eyes and slapping the table in her annoyance. She felt the familiar coils of disdain from the other, a drawn-out growl echoing in her mind. She could almost feel his urge to sink his claws into her. But he didn't act on it, just moving their hands back to the keyboard.
Fine. You want bad? I can see in your mind what you really consider unforgivable. Here.
In seconds, he had pulled up a new record and even made her face move closer to the screen.
Is this unrepentant rapist bad enough for you?
Sunset's eyes widened a bit as she took in the information. Out loud, she whispered, "How can anyone treat other people that way? 8 confirmed victims and testimony from even more? And the way he abused them."
I bet I could find the pictures the docs took. Show you all the cuts and the bruises. Oh, one of the poor darlings was burned, needed skin grafts. Now, is that a human that needs to be left alive?
Sunset shook her head, feeling sick as she scrolled back up to look at the name. Brass Knuckles. Who would name a kid that, she wondered.
You're not one to talk. You equines have a ton of stupid names.
Yeah, but I've never heard of anyone naming their foal after a brutal gang weapon.
Nah. Well, we killing him or what?
Sunset looked at the man's face. Even for a mugshot, his blue eyes seemed unusually blank, like he was looking past the camera. His lips were curled slightly into a smile, and he was clean-shaven. His hair was short, but styled nicely. He didn't look dangerous. But Sunset knew from experience you couldn't trust people on appearances alone. "Yeah," she answered. "If you must eat someone, eat him."
Finally!
Carnage straightened their arms and stood them up. He took a few moments to erase their internet history, and after a second of thought, also opened up the command prompt so he could flush the DNS cache. "That probably isn't necessary," Sunset commented.
Probably not, but why make things easy if someone snoops on this later?
I'm also surprised the IT department or whatever hasn't blocked that feature. Carnage didn't seem interested in discussing that further. He had gone quiet in her mind again, but she could feel his determination and hunger. They walked quickly out of the library, and once outside, broke into a jog. Sunset considered herself fairly athletic, but she was no Rainbow Dash. Spending more than a few minutes at a time running easily tired her out. At least, it used to. Now she found herself feeling fine even as Carnage sped from a jog into a normal run. Sunset just surrendered control over to him, keeping to her thoughts as he ran towards the prison. It would take a while, but there was no way they could take a car as recognizable as hers over that way without becoming a suspect. They left the campus, and Carnage pushed them into a full sprint. "Calm down, we're going to look suspicious," she complained.
Nah, we'll be fine. Stop worrying so much.
Sunset paid attention to how other people were looking at her, but none seemed too concerned. Sometimes other pedestrians would shoot her puzzled glances, and few even commented on her speed, but they mostly just seemed to assume she was late for something, and then moved on with their lives. It occurred to her that they were moving really fast. She wasn't sure she's ever run like this before, at least not as a human. They had to be going maybe 8 miles per hour, and still she didn't feel tired. It seemed to take no effort at all to move like this.
This is the power we have together,
Carnage bragged.
Isn't it great? We make each other strong, and I can make us stronger.
It is nice, she admitted. Even at their speed, though, it took them a while to get to the prison. They slowed down before they got too close, scouting out nearby buildings and then just stopping near the road that turned off and led toward it. It was then that Sunset really got to appreciate how powerful Carnage's senses were. Even through her eyes, Somehow he was able to pinpoint where all the cameras were, and she could tell he was analyzing the locations of the windows, where doors were at. He even managed to pick out where a guard was patrolling outside with a dog, and estimate how long the pair would take to make a lap of the compound. It was with a chill that Sunset realized he was using memories from his time spent with Light Touch to thoroughly case their target and determine the best way in. It was obvious, though, that technology here was far better than in Equestria, and he was looking at security that his last host had no experience with. So with what could only be described as a mental shrug, he decided to take a more direct route in. Carnage abruptly turned them away from the prison and walked toward a nearby gas station. It was small, with only 4 pumps and a tiny store. Even so, there were customers. "What are we doing?" Sunset asked.
Finding a suitable hiding place to get ready.
Carnage went behind the building and dove out of view of the parking lot. Then, without any warning, more of his body than Sunset had ever seen at once exploded out from under her skin. The vivid red flesh completely coated her like a second skin, covering her clothes, her face. It was like being smothered in tar, and she yelped and instinctively flinched. Though she quickly realized she felt okay and could still breathe. "A warning next time would be nice," she thought. Carnage chuckled, making them stand up tall. And oh, were they tall. Sunset guessed they were at least 2 feet taller now, and their body was coated in muscle. Big arms, powerful thighs, a toned abdomen. What she could see of them looked monstrous too, their fingers and toes tipped with sharp claws. She took control of their arms just so she could run their hands up towards her head. Her hair wasn't there anymore, and she assumed it must have gotten slicked down under Carnage's skin. Her ears and nose were similarly missing. Her entire face was hidden by the alien one.
"Holy crap,"
she whispered, and her voice came out low and guttural, through a mouth with far too many teeth. It was the voice Carnage spoke to her with.
"Impressive, yes?"
he thought smugly to her.
"No one will recognize you. No one will be able to punish you for what we are about to do. Now let's eat."
They began running. Sunset thought they were fast before, but that didn't compare to this. They easily hit 15 miles per hour, blowing past the customers at the gas station, many of whom leapt back and cried out in fear. They paid the humans no mind, sprinting towards the road leading to the prison and tearing down it. A vehicle was currently heading towards the gatehouse. They sped past it, and the driver slammed on their brakes and beeped. Carnage turned and snarled against the driver's side window, and the driver instead threw the car into reverse and got out of the way. Everything was happening so fast, Sunset could barely keep up with it. She was swept into Carnage's energy, enjoying the raw power in their body, even feeling a strange glee at how easily they intimidated that driver. The door to the gatehouse opened, and a man stepped out, looking shocked at the creature approaching him, but nonetheless readying his gun. Carnage kept running towards him, and Sunset felt a strange shifting on their back. Then a large tendril surged out of them, its tip forming into a sharp hook and shooting towards the other. He had little time to react before it had wrapped around him, stabbing his wrists until he dropped the weapon, at which point Carnage bound his hands too. He struggled, and Sunset did her best to share control of their body as they approached him, telling Carnage she didn't want to hurt him.
"You'll be fine,"
Carnage thought dismissively. "What the fuck are you?" the man demanded, still trying to get away from them. Bored, Carnage picked up the gun in a hand, and the other tensed. But instead of using it, Carnage simply disassembled it and tossed everything to the ground, except the firing pin, which he snapped in half and then swallowed. The man paled, freezing in place and just staring at them.
"I'll be accessing this facility now,"
Carnage said. He ignored Sunset's thoughts and looped the tendril further around their captive, before squeezing until he yelped with pain.
"You will give me a map of the inside."
I don't, he gasped for breath. "Have a map?"
"Sure you do. In here."
Carnage formed a second tendril, thinner but with the same hooked end. He plunged it into the other's forehead. Sunset cried out in their mind, but realized Carnage's skin seemed to just melt right through the other without truly harming him, though it still seemed to cause him severe discomfort. She then sensed a third mind briefly join with hers and Carnage's, a mind full of panic and distress. And then she suddenly knew the full layout of the prison, who ran it, even the names of the locations, and some of the prisoners. Carnage smirked and withdrew the tendril, and the third mind disappeared. Sunset almost expected there to be a gaping wound left in the officer's forehead, but there was nothing there. Even so, he groaned and wavered in their grip before passing out. Carnage dropped him carelessly to the ground.
We know where we're going now. Let's go.
Did we just read his mind?
Yes. I found that you had quite the knack for doing so with your magic, but I took a more entertaining route of getting the info we needed.
Will he be okay?
You'll wake up in a while if that's what you're wondering. Now come on!
They ducked into the gatehouse, finding the controls to open the gate.
A stealthy infiltration would have been boring anyway.
Carnage mused as they watched the gate move aside. He casually ripped the door of the building off as they walked back outside, and they ran through the gate as soon as there was room to. Though Sunset had the feeling they could just rip through the chain link if they wanted to. The prison consisted of a large main building with a few smaller ones that seemed to be used for storage and administrative purposes. Their target would be in the main one, likely already done with dinner and going back to his cell, unless he had an appointment or activity of some sort. They had a pretty good idea of the prison's schedule thanks to looking at the guards' memories. There were plenty of programs in place that aimed to rehabilitate and teach valuable life skills to the inmates, to give them something to fall back on once they get out. But it was entirely a choice whether anyone participated, and they had no way of knowing if Brass was among those who did. By now, their presence was apparent to the rest of the facility. Alarms began going off as they reached the entrance and tore their way in. Carnage winced, and Sunset noted with mild interest that he seemed unusually annoyed with the sound. But he pushed through it, and she figured it was nothing, and began sharing control with him again. They worked together as they rushed inside. Unarmed employees got out of their way, while those with weapons demanded they stop, then shooting at them when they refused to. The bullets harmlessly bounced off them. Sunset had expected it, but she was still amazed by how resilient they were. She felt Carnage's satisfaction that human weapons were as weak as he thought. Several tendrils emerged from their back to begin ripping away and destroying the weapons, and they heard emergency announcements that the facility was going into lockdown as they headed further in. They ignored the people who ran and tossed aside those who tried to block them. Sunset got the feeling it was only her will keeping them from just eating everyone around them. Carnage was ravenous. They eventually dropped down onto all fours, loping through the building with their head down and crashing through doors in their way. Occasionally, Carnage would grab someone at random and use a mix of Sunset's magic and his own natural abilities to glean information from their heads, searching for their target. They finally figured out exactly which cell he was in and headed that way. By this point, most of the inmates had been directed back to their cells and locked in, while those who couldn't get back as quickly were likely doing their best to shelter in place. Carnage looked hungrily at the different cells as he passed them, but didn't stop, going up a set of stairs and finally making it to the person who they came here for. The cell wasn't actually as bad as they were expecting. It was a small room with a barred door, offering a decent amount of privacy. Brass was sitting in a chair near the bed, reading a book, apparently not concerned with the alarms. But he quickly looked up when Carnage slammed against the door and began bending it open. He jumped up, backing away. "Hey, someone!" he shouted. "Someone help!" Carnage just smirked.
No one's coming to help you. You're gonna be meat, human.
Sure enough, every guard that tried to stop them was just shoved aside. Their weapons were destroyed. Several were injured and willingly backed off, retreating and calling for help. "We really need to hurry up before more serious forces get here," Sunset warned. "National Guard or SWAT or something."
Stop worrying, Shimmer. We have it under control. We're unstoppable.
Carnage succeeded in ripping the door off and throwing it aside, where it clattered noisily to the floor. Brass scrambled back until he hit the back wall, where he looked around for anything he could use as a weapon, but finding nothing. There was no trace of that mildly smug expression he had in his mugshot. He was terrified, and Sunset felt a sick pleasure at his fear.
Now you know how your victims felt, huh?
She asked, grinning and hearing Carnage encourage her in thought. They spoke together.
You are going to die today. No one will be hurt by you again.
He started to protest, but was cut off by their hands seizing his throat and squeezing so hard he immediately began choking. This level of raw power was intoxicating, and Sunset was swept along into her symbiote's bloodlust as they lifted Brass to their face and tore his head off. He didn't even have time to scream before their jaws were shredding his skull to pieces, and the taste of hot blood and the shockingly creamy brain matter was hitting their tongue. It was both disgusting and exhilarating, and they soon devoured the rest of the body. Bones easily snapped apart, savoring muscle and soft fat sliding down their gullet. The various organs rich in flavor, all marinated in the irresistible blood that poured out around their teeth. It only took them moments to devour the man, and once they were done, they spun around and left the cell, mouth gaping open and tongue lolling out as they hungered for more. There was screaming now, the smell of blood and the sight of their face making it obvious what just happened. They lunged for the nearest person, a guard who had been trying to shout them down, and ripped them apart. They lost all rational control, their minds mingling into one and screaming for meat. They ate the guard and ripped the door from the next cell, attacking the hapless inmate within. His face was nothing but a brief flash of horror before he was disappearing down their throat. Carnage roared in pleasure and ran out, and the next minutes were nothing but a red-tinged haze of destruction. They lost count of how many inmates and prison employees they devoured or simply killed painfully as they charged through the building. None of the weapons shot at them did anything except make them angrier. Then, abruptly, it seemed like they were alone. No one approached them. There was just the sound of the alarms and an almost eerie stillness to their surroundings. They looked around, senses on high alert as they headed toward the front of the building. Then they heard it. Large vehicles pulling up outside, doors slamming, the sound of heavy boots. They turned a corner and were immediately met with a flashbang going off, momentarily blinding them and making them growl as they shook their head, trying to orientate themselves. Footsteps approached, and once their vision cleared, they found that they were confronted with nearly a dozen SWAT team members, all in body armor and aiming high-powered rifles at them. Carnage's eyes swept across them in seconds, analyzing their gear. They were certain the team was no match for them, but they decided to pause nonetheless and see where this is going. The member in the center, a tall woman with a fierce expression, yelled at them to stand down. Carnage gleefully replied,
No.
The woman signaled to her team, calling, "Masks! Copy!" In unison, the rest began pulling on gas masks, and then one threw in a tear gas canister. The smoke billowing up stung Carnage's eyes and throat, but it wasn't enough to incapacitate them, as they were clearly hoping. They snarled and charged forward, wincing as a few other canisters hit them and went off, but not stopping. They scattered the line of SWAT members, and while a few managed to shoot them, the bullets were only slightly more painful than the ones they were shot with before. Sunset began managing to clear her head as they ran, pulling her thoughts away from Carnage's with some difficulty, and pleading for them to just get out of here. They've done enough. With a grunt, Carnage agreed, saying he was quite full now. They ignored everyone around them as they broke through a wall and escaped the building, leaping clear over the fence rather than try to get through the barricaded gate, and then galloping on all fours back towards the city. They didn't stop until they were miles away, and had found a suitable place to hide in a random alleyway. And as soon as Carnage's skin receded from Sunset's, she began hyperventilating and sank back against the wall.
What?
He snapped at her. We just killed so many people!" she cried, feeling her face to make sure she was back to normal before slipping down onto the ground, trying not to break into tears.
They all deserved it, especially the ones in the cells.
"No!" she yelled back at him. Despite her best efforts, tears began flowing down her cheeks. She briefly choked up, but swallowed and managed to keep shouting. A lot of those people probably weren't even violent offenders! How many people did we kill who were just drug users? Or maybe they held up a convenience store or wrongful convictions altogether? And the guards that were just doing their jobs!
Ugh.
He groaned and rolled his eyes.
I bet many of them abused their positions, and the ones who didn't were complacent to the ones who did.
That's not...
And the small amount of innocents who could have been in the cells? Who cares? We probably killed off a lot of scum. Think of how many future lives you've probably saved by getting rid of all that filth. We did a good thing. That's what you're into, right? Justice. We did what few others would dare to do. And it felt incredible.
Sickened, she shook her head and began walking out of the alley, angrily wiping her eyes off as she went. Carnage quickly hid back under her skin, but they kept arguing in thought as they headed back towards the college. It wasn't worth it. We really lost control. I didn't like feeling like that.
Don't lie to me. I felt your joy as we tore apart those weaklings. None of them could stand against us. And you like it.
That was your influence making me think like that. That's not who I am. Look, let's just stop talking about it. I just want to go home. Sunset wrapped her arms around her stomach, feeling like she was going to puke. But whether it was her own self-control or just Carnage clamping down on that reflex, she didn't. She was in a bit of a daze as she walked back, thoughts drifting off. Yes, the strength was incredible, but not all the deaths. The deaths were absolutely not worth it. Eventually, she made it back to the campus and into her own dorm. It was past sunset, and she was exhausted both mentally and physically. She fumbled with her key for a while before managing to unlock her room and go inside, and she barely remembered to lock the door behind her before she was just dropping her keyring on the nearest surface. She kicked her shoes off and crossed to her bed, collapsing onto it and letting out a long groan.
Why don't you just sleep on things?
Carnage suggested, feeling her already drifting off to sleep. She mumbled something and then passed out.
Annoying bitch.
He had to convince her to stop feeling shame over dominating the weak. If one is unable to fight back against a predator, one becomes prey. How hard was that to understand? Too hard for his host, apparently. Still feeling wide awake, Carnage used the nutrition from their many victims to begin strengthening himself. It was refreshing, and he thought to himself that a few more massacres like that would be more than enough to give him the strength he needed to take on Sunset's friends. And once he had consumed them, he'll easily be able to go to Equestria and take down the rest of his traitorous gang. Once he had his fill of just reveling in his new power, he decided to rest as well. As he did, he engaged in his usual hobby of reading through his host's memories. She had a long and fascinating life, and he was still learning things about both humans and ponies from her. He wanted to know as much as he could, wanted to know how to best control her. He had been unsure at first when he learned that she had the ability to read minds, concerned that she may be able to determine his intentions. But it seemed she either couldn't or wouldn't use the power on him. Perhaps it was because he wasn't of this world. Or perhaps her power simply didn't work on herself, and he was part of her now. Or maybe she was just that trusting. Whatever the reason, he was glad for it. The less she suspected him, the more helpless she would be to fight him later. After a few hours, once he was finally bored of looking through her mind, he dropped off to sleep as well. He already knew they would have much to discuss in the morning. They had small portable phones that seemed able to perform the functions of a I have no idea what that sound was, but it was horrifying. So it took all of Light's effort to walk silently. even the slightest... Did you just meow? Opal! I was on a good streak here. Why do you have to meow so loudly? What? What, you want to come out? A few minutes ago she was meowing to come in. Now you want to meow to come out. Alright, come on. Yeah, shut up. Yeah, I spoil you. Fuck. Now I know how Lost Narrator feels. Do you want in or out, you crazy cat?
Okay, apparently some of you humans wanted me to read some of this artist's music. Alright, let's see what we got. Oh, I see. Yo, my yo, what's good? What you doing? I'm chilling and shit. What happened? Yo, I'm dumb tight right now. Like, tell me how this I was in the club and he was dead trying to style on me, trying to play me like, yo, I'm so tight I feel like these be thinking just, what the fuck? Just because I'm a bitch, like I don't be having bros to smack a that's crazy. So what you want me to do? What I want you to do? I want you to handle that. That's what the fuck I want you to do. What the fuck do you have me reading?